All right, Shalom. First off, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shah, Bahasham Kakadash. I want to give double honors to the apostles, the bishops, and elders of Great Millstone, and the sincere Shalom to the Akim out here that's doing again, pushing his work in truth and in sincerity. I want to go on this video, okay, that the lack of an inheritance is a curse onto our people. Okay. When we look at the state, the condition that we're in this country, as we live, the life that we live in right now, okay. We are under curses, okay. As a people, and some of our people don't, they don't get it, for some, somehow this is all they think that they are. I mean, that life is, okay. We're supposed to go to work, work for somebody else, have a 401k, if you got children, you probably have some people don't have a life insurance plan, okay. But, some people are living paycheck to paycheck, okay? And having to borrow from another person and stuff like that, man. Some people are homeless, okay? So for someone to say that this is all there is to life, that you haven't been thinking. This is all you know. Okay, but this is a curse onto us from our, from when we did have an inheritance. We didn't appreciate it. Okay, now I looked at this because somebody had ran this stat by me, right? It says over 70% of black-owned businesses fail because they don't have a successor to turn the business over to, right? And this says succession is definitely a major challenge for small businesses, including black-owned businesses. Okay, and they that the fact that they gotta specify it as a small business, black-owned businesses are small businesses. Where are the major black-owned businesses? Okay. And I'm talking about like on a major level, not just one or two people that's doing it. Okay? I'm talking about the people that, they started this business, and it's flourishing. It's been passed down to generation to generation. Okay? Everybody know about it. We don't know about those things. Okay? You might have a business that's been, doing good for past 50, 60 years, okay? But then it gets to the point where, okay, who's coming up next if it's a family-owned business? Okay? Now, a lot of these businesses that people know, okay, that be endorsing and stuff like that, guess what? They come from family-owned businesses, okay? So, and they're major businesses, okay, that's been passed down. The recipe has been passed down. Like I believe Hillary Clinton, her peoples come from the ketchup, Heinz ketchup, I believe. Okay, but and we're gonna fact check that as well, right? It says, but the over 70% figure is hard to verify in a reliable way. A lot of businesses closures happen because of broader issues too. Lack of access to capital, thin profit margins, economic downturns, burnout, family instability, poor planning, or the owner being the entire operation with no system behind them. Okay? And it says one thing that is consistently discussed and business research is that many family businesses across all groups struggle with generational transfer. And it says the founder often carries the vision, relationships, and operational knowledge personally. And if there's no trained successor, the business can disappear when the founder retires, dies, or burns out. Okay, for many black-owned businesses, specifically, some analysts point to issues like less inherited wealth to stabilize the business during transitions. Okay, smaller access to loans and investment capital, businesses being concentrated in service sectors with tighter margins. It says lack of estate planning or succession planning, children pursuing more stable careers instead of taking over the business. The child will go work for somebody else, which is another family-owned business. Okay, and they don't even get close to even being, having a business turned over to them. Okay, there'll be a worker ant for another business. Okay, and that may be the case for we might not know someone who has their own business. Okay, but it says the founder operating solo instead of building management layers. At the same time, there are strong examples of multi-generational black businesses and institutions that have survived by intentionally preparing successors, documenting systems, teaching ownership, and keeping wealth assets inside the family or community. The larger point is probably this: a business that depends entirely on one person is fragile. A business becomes durable when knowledge, leadership, ownership, and values can continue after the founder is gone. And that also goes into the truth, okay, of what we passing on to the next generation. Okay, whether it's our children, or those who are, here when we are gone. Okay, so it says a lot of black. I posted that back in there. Those are all commonly cited factors, and they often compound each other rather than happening separately. For example, if a business starts undercapitalized, the owner may have to do everything themselves to save money. That can lead to burnout, inconsistent operations, and no time to build systems or train future leadership. That one economic setback, inflation, rent increases, slow sales, illness, can hit harder because there's no more cushion, or isn't much cushion. Okay? A lot of people don't have a cushion in this society. Okay? Something that they can fall back on if they actually need to, in those, times when of uncertainty. Okay? You get sick and it's like, well, shoot, I gotta keep on working because I can't afford to. I don't got no sick pay. Okay? I can't take a vacation because I gotta keep on working. Taking a vacation, I got, you gotta save up and all that stuff. You gotta store up money. You gotta store up funds. Okay? It says a lot of small businesses in general struggle with depending too heavily on the founder, lack of documented systems, no succession planning, limited cash reserves. It says family or partnership conflicts, difficulty scaling beyond survival mode. Okay, for many black-owned businesses, researchers and business groups have also discussed structural barriers with lower approval rates for traditional loans, less inherited startup capital, and fewer established business networks compared to some other groups. It says those factors can make recovery and long-term growth more difficult. And when you go into a lot of these other nations, the scriptures talk about the dogs to lick the wounds and stuff like that. A lot of these nations, that come over here, they got backing from their community. You know, they got backing that that they can go to. If you go to somebody that you may know, you can't have that. Because they struggling. Everybody back is to the wall as far as Israelites. You got a lot of Northern Kingdom that are doing good for their business. Their setup. A lot of them end up going into construction or making foods and stuff like that. Issachar. Scripture say that he is hired. They got that concept down pack, it seems. But to talk about Israelites having it down pack, nah, you can forget about that. Okay. Talking about Judah, Negroes. Okay. It says ownership of assets instead of It says, at the same time, there are black-owned businesses that become highly successful and multi-generational by focusing on ownership of assets instead of only cash flow, strong bookkeeping and planning, training employees into leadership, keeping business and personal finances separate, building systems that work without the founder present, preparing heirs or successors early. Okay, the difference between a hustle and a lasting institution is often whether the business can function beyond the founder's direct labor. Okay, and I said, how can this be our rest if we don't have any generations to pass businesses down to, but other races do? Okay, and it says, it sounds like you're speaking about stability, legacy, and the feeling that a community isn't fully at rest if each generation has to start over instead of inheriting institutions, land, businesses, networks, and systems from the previous one. There's a real difference between surviving generation to generation and building continuity across generations. Okay, and that's what the reality of what's going on. It's like we're just surviving from generation to generation. Okay, and every generation is like, well, we survived this, we survived that, and it's like we all in freaking hell, man. Okay, it says more communities that appear economically stable often benefited from long periods of accumulated family businesses, property ownership, trade networks, mentorship and succession planning, and slavery. Okay, they ain't gonna put that though. Okay, it says when businesses survive multiple generations, knowledge and capital compound over time. For many black families in the United States, historians and economists point to disruptions that affected that continuity: slavery, segregation, destruction of prosperous communities, exclusion from lending, displacement from highways, urban renewal, unequal education access, and loss of land or property in various eras. Those kinds of disruptions make it harder to establish multi-generational institutions. At the same time, it's also true that long-term stability usually requires internal development too. Okay. I'm gonna read this. A community's rest economically is usually tied to permanence. Fathers teaching sons and daughters, assets staying in the family, businesses surviving the founder, neighborhoods retaining ownership, and each generation starting farther ahead instead of from zero. Okay, but from a biblical perspective, many passages connect rest, inheritance, land, and continuity together, not just individual wealth, but something enduring for future generations. Okay, and this is what, what we are a part of. Okay, this truth, we are establishing something for the future generations, man. Okay, not just when you die, then you go to heaven. Okay, like how Christians want to say, you die, you go to heaven, but because you saved. But then what about the other people that's behind you? Okay, you think that you're saved because you're going to heaven because you believed in Jesus with all your heart. But then this person that didn't accept Jesus, okay, because he been going through this hell in his life, he ain't have nothing going on. He just left to suffer. And then what if he got children? They just left to suffer. So we just suffering generational curses, because we're inheriting, messed up stuff, man. Okay, but then, y'all say, well, this is prosperity and, it's because this person, well, yeah, that is true. Okay, but this is deeper than you just going, to heaven when you die. Okay? Well, we are establishing, the Lord's righteousness on earth. Okay? The kingdom of heaven being on earth. Okay? It ain't going to be no more death or somebody, you got people that are living today that's going to inherit the kingdom. Okay? And they're going to live forever, and their children and their children's children, many generations. You're going to be able to see those generations. Okay? So, I said, give me Bible verses about this, right? Lamentations 5:2. It says, our inheritance is turned to strangers, our houses to aliens. And right now, our land is being, consumed right in front of us, by people who claim to be our people, but not keeping anything inside of the Bible. Okay? Lamentations 5:16, the crown is fallen from our head, often used to describe the loss of rulership, stability, and dignity. Micah 2:10, arise ye and depart, for this is not your rest, because it is polluted. We just broke down why, this place is polluted. Okay? People commonly use this verse to argue that a society marked by instability, corruption, and lack of lasting inheritance cannot be true rest. Okay? So yeah, you Christians talking about you when you die, you go to heaven, But what about the inheritance on this earth, man? What about, and we're not talking about through the American philosophy, because this place, this current setup in this world got to be destroyed. Okay, we living in the last days of this kingdom, this society. Okay, Proverbs 13:22. A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. Okay, and we don't have that. We barely got something to give to the next child that we have. That's one of the reasons why a lot of people don't want to have children. Because what are you bringing your children into? Okay, if the family's not together, the mother and the father are not around. Then when the father around, your father die, and you inherit, debt from your father. Okay, or your parent or a loved one that passed away. Okay, you got to bury them and stuff like that. They didn't have a policy. Okay, where their policy wasn't covered by certain things, and then these other, things, these businesses, they try to find a way to get over on you. Saying you didn't qualify for this and that. Okay, I'm gonna get this right fast, and I'm gonna close this lesson. Okay. Because this is another thing that goes into it as well. Ecclesiastes 2 and It's 18. It says, yeah, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. And who knows whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over all my labor wherein I have labored, and wherein I have shewed myself wise under the sun. This is also vanity. Okay? So, you might have a child, and it's like you leave this stuff off to them when they pass away. They get older, and it's like they just let it all go to waste. That's what happened to King Solomon. His son, ended up, losing it all. Everything that he had. That King Solomon had worked for. Okay, he had 40 years of peace. The world was in subjection at that time. Okay, it was flourishing. Okay, and he let it all go away. So, Lord willing, this was edifying. I want to say shalom until next time.